An Open Secret. The Family Story of Robert and John Gregg Allerton. By Nicholas L. Syrett. Published by the University of Chicago Press. Introduction. On March 4, 1960, Robert Allerton became a father. He was 86 years old at the time, and his newly adopted son John Gregg was 60. The pair had already been living together, and calling themselves father and son for almost 4 decades. Thus the adoption, while legally affirming Allerton and Gregg's filial status, paradoxically had the effect of bringing that very status into question. Allerton was an immensely wealthy benefactor of the arts, both in Illinois, where he and Gregg maintained legal residence and where the adoption took place, the first adoption of an adult child in the state's history, and in Hawaii, where the two had lived for 20 years. The adoption was newsworthy in both places. The Champaign-Urbana Courier, covering the jurisdiction where the adoption was finalized, announced, "Companion is adopted by R. Allerton." Other papers used similar sorts of headlines. Robert Allerton adopts friend. Robert Allerton, Piatt Park donor, adopts companion of many years. Even more ambiguously, the Honolulu Star-Bulletin titled its article, "Have been friends for 38 years. Kauai's Allerton, 86 to adopt 60-year-old son," referring to Gregg as both a friend and a son before the adoption had even occurred. The reporter explained that Mr. Allerton and Mr. Gregg have lived at Lawai Kai on Kauai since 1938, and many friends believe that Gregg already was Allerton's adopted son. Despite the fact that the adoption did make them father and son in the eyes of the law, it also had the public effect of calling into question the very thing it was most designed to assert, that Robert Allerton was John Gregg's father, and not something else. And yet, as the Star-Bulletin noted, perhaps despite itself, it is difficult to become something that one claims already to be. In a similar vein, the Chicago Tribune reported that Gregg had had the status of son for 30 years under the headline, "Son, 30 years is adopted by Allerton," the quotation marks around son suggesting doubt about Gregg's real status over those decades. This conundrum, who Robert Allerton and John Gregg were to each other and how they explained themselves to the world, had been, in many respects, the fundamental question of their then 38 years together. This book tells the story of their lives. Born in the late 19th century to one of Chicago's richest entrepreneurs and raised among its elite, Robert Allerton was expected by most around him to assume the responsibilities of his father's business, marry an eligible young Chicago socialite, and produce the next generation of Allertons. In one respect, taking on some of his father's.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?